Hey everyone, and welcome to another video. So today I am super excited. Let me get that straightened out here. Okay, so today I am super excited to do a video that has been a long time in the making, and I've been wanting to do this for a long time, the evolution of Hunter's cover. So for those of you who may not know, my book Hunter Valiant Book 1 has been through so many covers, and today I wanted to show you each one, yes, even the really beginning crappy ones that most of you have never seen before. I guarantee you've never seen these for the most part. Most of you probably have not. And explain why I went through so many renditions, and while I'm at it, tell you guys exactly what not to do when you're doing your book covers so that you don't make the same mistakes I do. And if you're not a writer, then you don't have to worry about this. You can just sit back and enjoy learning about all the mistakes I made and all the covers that I've been through. And this is also kind of for those of you who have not seen the new cover of Hunter yet, this will be a cover reveal for you guys. By the time you guys are watching this, I should have announced the rebranding of the series. Hopefully, my plan is this is going to be the final one, the final version of all the Valiant covers. I've already got 3 of them. We're still working on Samurai, and then we're planning for Assassins. So I only have those 3 done as of the time of making this video, and but I am planning to do an announcement video where I let you give you guys the links to the people covers, because I'm not going to sell them anymore, and make the formal announcement and everything. And so by the time you guys are watching this, I've made that announcement video. If I have, it'll be as a card up here, wrong side, up here on the screen for you guys to watch that if you want to watch that first. And then come back here, and I am planning on actually showing you guys and doing a very special video revealing the covers for the entire series that I did pay for, and I do have the people covers, but since I'm rebranding them, those covers, some of them are books that are in the future that will never see the light of day, because by the time those books come out, they'll have the new covers. And I thought some of you guys did actually like the people covers and may want to see them, and this is also will be my video revealing the titles for the rest of the series and the rest of the books in it. So that'll be another video. If it's up by the time you guys are watching this, I'll have it as a card. If not, without further ado, let's get into this. So before we get into that, a little bit of background. The Valiant series was my first fantasy series, and it was the first one I took seriously and started making it a career and stuff. It wasn't really a career at this time, but I've been on Wattpad.com for a long time. Wattpad is a site where you used to be able to just write books, and then readers could just read them for free. So at the time that I wrote Hunter would have been about 2012, 2013, and I put it on Wattpad 2014, 2015. And on Wattpad you need covers, and at the time I literally did not know anything about self-publishing. Writing was not a career, it was a hobby for me. And Wattpad had this little cover creator program you could use that they don't even have. Like, this is an old version of it. They have a much more upgraded program now than they did back then, because Wattpad was still relatively new. And so I just used that, and I think I used a little phone app that honestly we don't even have anymore, because it was such an old phone apps, like everything was just old, okay? And I didn't understand the idea of image rights either. And so I just grabbed a stock image complete with the watermark on it. I don't know what I thought watermarks were, but I didn't understand the concept of it. And I just put some text on there and called it a day. And that was my cover for Hunter. So that's what we're going to look at today. That is the first cover of Hunter that Hunter ever had. There it is. So I think I may have taken 2 different stock images and put them together. I was at least smart enough to try to change the image up, but I did not have the rights to either one. So this was a very wrong cover. This should never have happened. I wasn't making money off of it, so at least I didn't do anything illegal. But at the time, the Valiant books had no book order. I was just writing them willy-nilly, and they're all written that way, so technically you could jump into like Shifter or Assassin or whatever. So at the time, the label was a Valiant novel. I only put them in order when I got published by Ambassador International, and the publishers wanted a publishing order, and that's when I chose the order, even though they're still designed in kind of a Marvel-ish way, where it's like the heroes' backstories, and then they all come together in the final books for the big boss fight, essentially. And then I also included the word by, like by the author, which you don't do that on the cover. It's just there's so much about this that's so wrong, so cringy. You can even see the original, my nickname, or not nickname, my username on Wattpad was JesusFreak202, and the original cover actually had that at the bottom. And then I was like, when I started thinking that I may do this, I wanted people to recognize my name and not my username, and that's when I covered it up and put Joanna White. You can see the JesusFreak202 really faintly. So overall, I don't have much to say on this. It sucked. It's terrible. Let's move on. So I got this was before I got accepted by my publisher. I decided that I was going to try to do writing as a career, and I didn't know anything about launching a book, publishing a book, marketing a book, making a book cover. I literally knew nothing, guys. I didn't even know how to edit my book. I literally just put a cover on it and threw it up on Amazon and hoped for the best. So this was the next cover, and at least at that time I knew that I had to design a cover that I had the rights to, and because I didn't have the money for stock images at the time, I decided to go outside, use a sword, take a picture, and go with kind of a more object-like cover, because I had at least the sense to know, okay, fantasy books, object covers, it's about a hunter, let's do a sword. And that was the connection that I made, and I used a bunch of like really silly apps to try to get this to looking, and because I'd seen some covers that have like a bestseller like pop up on it, I decided that would make my cover look good, that would make people want to buy it. I didn't realize you actually had to qualify in order to use that label. Again, I was completely stupid. So this is the second version of Hunter's cover. So it's a little bit crisper, a little bit cleaner. I took a picture with one of our swords, put it up against a tree, and then I edited it. I put a bunch of filters on it and I just put a bunch of filters on it to make it look cool. And then that #1 bestseller label that was completely false at the time, just because I thought it looked good. And stuff, but you can see that the concept is here. It's meant to be a sword in the woods because that represents the hunter. That's, you know, the inquiry blade that the hunters use. That's the primary object for the cover. So that's kind of the direction I was trying to go. So this time I was submitting I was submitting most of the Valiant books to different publishers because, again, it had no order at the time. So I just thought if one of them gets picked up, then more than likely the publishers will pick up the rest of the series. So just boom, and I just spammed them in different publishing companies. And one of the companies actually found Shifter and really, really loved it. And I told them that it was part of a series and they were interested, and they asked me about the series order. And so I was like, okay, chronologically it starts with Hunter. So that's when I was like, Hunter's technically book 1. So they read through Hunter, they enjoyed it, and decided to pick it up along with Shifter at the same time. So those were the first two that were picked up by Ambassador International, and they hired a cover designer, and we went through a few concepts. I can't actually find those concepts yet. Let me see if I can pull them up. Okay, so I did look and I can't find them. If I do find them, I will look for them with my editing self and I'll pop it up here on the screen. So we went through a few design concepts, and the main concept that I talked about with the designer was, do we want a person or do we want an object? And I was worried about being picky about the appearances, and I know that some covers that are with publishers, the character does not match the book description, and that bugs me so much when it happens, and I didn't want that to happen to mine. So I thought objects would be easier because I had, you know, concepts in my head for, okay, the objects that I could use for most of the books, and so that's the one we went with. And yeah, and so this was the third cover of Hunter. This was Hunter's third cover, and this was designed by the designer that Ambassador International had at the time. So already you can see the professional quality. You can see such a stark difference between the first two and this one. So you can imagine that when I first held this in my hands, I was giddy, I was excited. It was a dream come true. I utterly loved it. I was just so enamored and so in awe that I had a book cover in my hands that was so professional and so profound, and it still had the sword in the woods thing. The sword did look a little too gemstone-y, like it looks a little fancier than what I was wanting, but I still just loved holding my books in my hands. And the font to me was beautiful. It had the swirls, and I remember being captivated with how they did this because I ended up looking up the font and trying to figure out how they did that. And so later on I'll explain more about that, but it was so fun, and I just really enjoyed it. And so this was really special to me. And then I left my publishers. I bought the rights back, and I won't get into all of that. But I basically got the rights back. And so I decided to start self-publishing. And I can't really get into my reasons behind this, but essentially I just wanted control of, you know, choosing it, because I got a lot of feedback that this still wasn't right. It wasn't professional. You know, it wasn't selling very well. And I got a lot of tips from people, and there was other issues. And so I just decided, you know what, I need to leave and, you know, have control. And I felt like it was what God was leading me to do. And so that's when I started practicing with designs. And I went through one rendition that I sent to them in hopes that they could, because I think they were preparing to get a new designer, and so I was hoping that we could do something like that. But again, the disagreements there, and it just caused problems. And so this was the version that I sent to them. And the swirls, I remember I looked up the font, and I found, and I bought the licensing to this font. The Desire font is what it's called. And mine like didn't have the swirls, so I had to research how to do that, and I eventually had to learn, and it was a long process to figure out how to do that. But eventually this was the new concept, because this sword looked more medieval, and it just felt like it wasn't as busy, because the woods and the trees and all of that just wasn't good for the fantasy genre, and it's too busy for a cover, and it just doesn't work. Essentially, this worked a little bit better, and so that's what I sent. And then I bought the rights back and everything, and I bought the rights back and everything, and that's when I was able to design my own. And so I used this concept to go through many renditions of this cover. So this doesn't count as Hunter's Book 4, because I didn't actually publish with this one, but this was another concept that I did have. So the next one is the one that I designed, which was Hunter's 4th cover. So I did play with it a lot. Let me show you guys something. As you can see here, I went through many renditions of this to try to get it right. I was messing with the title placement. It was up, it was down, it was, you know, scooting my name over, wording, you know, figuring out where to do it. I eventually also figured out a new technique using GIMP. I figured out a new technique using GIMP, which was to make it look more metallic and make it pop out. I obviously here I used too much too much drop shadow, and I did publish my rebranding of the series was republishing Hunter and Shifter with my branding, with this new concept with me, Under Control. And Samurai was never released, so I did release a cover of Samurai with this cover, and I released one for Assassin with this style that I had designed. And then I started talking with professional designers, and like, okay, this isn't working. There's nothing personal enough about it. You know, it doesn't really tell us anything. It's still not going to entice readers to buy the book. And I still was not seeing increasing in sales. And so that's when I was like, okay, I need to hire a designer, because I'm not a professional designer. I don't know what I'm doing. And I was willing to acknowledge that. And so I was able to find a designer that really worked with me. And again, we went through several different concepts and renditions and versions before we found the idea of going with a people cover, because the sword just wasn't personal enough. The object covers weren't personal enough. It wasn't attracting people to the story. This doesn't tell you anything about Hunter, and there's nothing in it that includes snow. So I don't know what this was. And the font looks very 90s, so the Desire font wasn't working. I just needed somebody who knew what they were doing. And so that's when we came up, and this is when I had Hunter's 5th cover. So I don't actually have the ebook version of it, so I had to pull up the paperback version. But as you can see, based on Hunter's like transition and how it's changed over the years, when I got this, I was blown away because it looked professional. And with this one, the whole series matched. That was my other problem with the ones that I was making, is that they were not consistent. The objects weren't in the same place. The title and my author name and the subtitle was not all in the same place. They didn't look the same. They didn't feel the same. They didn't feel the same as a series. It was not obvious by the cover to tell that they are part of the same series. A true series cover should be able to tell that, okay, they're part of the same series. You know, that should be obvious by the cover. And so I published it, and I was super happy with it, and this was what I was going with. I thought this was going to be the final version. And then we came across a problem, and I found out from some designers that this was actually a image taken that was actually of another character, part of The Witcher. And I started looking on Google, and I did a back search and found that out. So I told my designer, and she redesigned the cover, so this became Hunter's 6th cover. we found a woman that matched Avarella much better, and I felt like it told the story. And compared to the feedback from the previous ones with just the sword and the woods and the trees and the snow, in that one cover's case, this was more personal. You can tell that she's been through something. She had gone through a lot. She's covered in dirt and grime and blood. There's the woods, and it's dark like Zagara. The darkness itself represents the corruption that's through each book in the series, and so it felt more personal. It felt like a proper cover for Hunter, and I was very happy with it. But then my designer quit on me, and without getting into too much detail about that, I have more books that's coming out. I did buy as many books in the series, as many covers for the series as I could, but I still have more books that are coming. I still have other box sets and collections and side books and companion stories, and this is going to be a very huge series. And I also have the audiobooks to think about, and so because of that, it forced me to get a new designer, because one may assume it may be easy for just a designer to come in and pick up the work of another designer and just go with it, but it's not that easy, and it's very complicated when you start talking about rights to fonts and, you know, the images and stuff, and to make it look consistent and keep up with the dark feel, there would be the rights to the dark image that is used, because that is a separate image and layer, and it's just very, very complicated. The rights to this swirl design and, you know, the font for both the title and my name, and just very complicated. And on top of that, I decided, okay, well, since I have to get a new designer, I want to get feedback on these, because if these are good, then I need to find somebody who can work with me on these. But if they're not, then, you know, I'm still having issues essentially. And so that's when I started getting a lot of feedback, and I got feedback about how this looked like dark romance, it looked like paranormal or urban fantasy. This one in particular, Hunter, you know, it looked like a zombie apocalypse, and the font looks more like a thriller. It doesn't seem like fantasy. It doesn't fit the genre. And so once people pointed it out, I could see that. I can see that this looks like a thriller, and it doesn't at all look like a fantasy book. And I started looking at other fantasy books, and I started researching and doing research about designing and how your cover needs to match the genre. And I did so much research, and I learned and grew so much, and I realized that it was true. And so I realized that since I have to get a new designer anyway to finish the series, it's better off to just redesign the series, rebrand the series, and do a final one, and make sure that I do it right this time, that I get a good designer who knows what they're doing, unlike this one, and one that's not going to quit on me, one that's going to make sure that they do it right, because that's, you know, kind of what I'm paying you for, is to do it right and make sure that the designer, has to know the genres that they are designing in, and make sure that they match the genre and are aware of that. And if they're not, then they're not doing their due diligence as a designer. And so I felt very screwed over, but I was happy to find a designer that primarily designs in the epic fantasy and the fantasy genre. And I did so much research, and I talked with them and explained all of my problems, and they've been wonderful. He's been wonderful to work with, and he redesigned the covers and came up with a new concept and a new branding. And this is it. Like, when I looked at it, it was the first time, because when I looked at this cover and this one, I felt for the first time like the series looks consistent. I still didn't have that this is it feeling, but I had, okay, this looks more like a consistent series, so we'll go with it. And part of that was my fault for not being more diligent about my research and what was necessary for the series, and, you know, all of that stuff. But mistakes aside, basically, when I saw this cover, this new cover, the final 7th cover of Hunter, I saw it and I was like, this is it. This is the cover I've always wanted. This is the cover that tells the story. This is Hunter's cover. And I've never felt that before, not even the first time I held it in my hands, and I was so in awe just to get to hold my book for the first time. So without further ado, this is the cover of Hunter. Already, immediately, you can see a vast difference between all of these renditions that I've showed you and this one. Huge difference. And I mean, there's so much to unpack in this cover that is just unreal. Like, the font looks actual fantasy font. It's a font that is easy for me to use because Stencil is actually a free font that you can use. It actually is one of the primary fantasy fonts. And so it'll be better. And while I'm at it, I've actually learned more formatting techniques, so the formatting for this book will be better. The leaves on that are dark and black, which represent Zagara and how dark it is, and just the constant, you know, darkness and the how they're in a forest most of the time. Same with the vines and stuff. It's a dark forest, and that's kind of where the setting takes place. The sword is gritty. The sword is medieval. The sword is an Enkori blade, and that's what it looks like. And then of course you have the snakes. And the snakes are metaphors and symbolism. So there's multiple metaphors that the snakes actually do. But number one is obviously the fact that my book is still a fantasy, is still a Christian fantasy series, and each book parallels with the Bible, and the whole thing parallels with the Bible itself. And the battle against darkness and corruption in the books represent, you know, the battle with Satan and sin and all of that stuff that we are in real life. And Satan is obviously always known as a serpent, and so the parallel is that the serpents represent the Dark Master. And Hunter is book one. It's the first time that we get to hear and see the Dark Master and find out about him and everything else, but they have a secondary metaphorical purpose. And both of the snakes, usually when you lie, you're called a snake, like you're a lying snake. Like snakes represent lying usually, and that's probably because of like Satan becoming a serpent in the garden, kind of deceiving Eve and stuff, is usually where that comes from. But there's two of them, and there are two characters, Jared and Averella, and both of them have lies and secrets that are used in this book that are prominent, and that is kind of the big climactic situation that happens in multiple points in this book, is when the lies unravel and secrets are revealed. And so that's where like the snake in the grass, the lying, that's both of the snakes that represent that. And so for me, when I got this, I just was blown away by it, and finally feel like I have a cover, a professional cover for my books. And I've had so many problems. I've had so many issues with previous designers that it's just been so stressful. But ultimately, every single bad circumstance and every single bad experience with the designer led me to find this designer that I have now, led me to have this book cover now. And it wouldn't be like this without each of those ones, even the ones that you start off with, this little cover from this girl who just had a dream of writing, that never thought she would ever hold her book in her hands, to the girl who finally got to hold it for the first time and realized I am a published author, who was terrified to try to take this journey alone, but knew that I needed to try to get a professional designer, and finally saw my series as a series for the first time, to now seeing the potential that this series has. And the metaphors that I can put into each cover is just going to be so awesome, but also still making sure that they fit, they look consistent as a series, and you know, that they look like a fantasy, epic fantasy, that they fit the genre basically. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this video and looking at the evolution of Hunter's cover. I've been wanting to do this for a long time, but I'm glad that I waited, because I was going to do it with these covers, but it's like I'm glad I waited because, you know, I had one more. So 7 covers, it's a lot, but it is necessary. And so by the time you guys are watching this, I have a link to Hunter in the description below. You can hopefully buy it or pre-order it. I'm sure I'll have it up by the time I put this video up, but you can buy it in brand new formatting. I figured out some new, I've actually got Atticus, which is a really, really good formatting program, and I'm able to actually include pictures as chapter headings. So I'm very, very excited for this book and this book cover, and I feel like this is going to revitalize the entire series. And yeah, so I'm very excited. I will be doing a cover reveal for the Valiant books that are already published, so Hunter, Shifter, Samurai, Assassin, and Rogue. I'll be doing a video doing a cover reveal for all 5 of those when they get done. So look for that. And so if you liked this video, please be sure to give it a like and subscribe for more writing and reading videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And in the meantime, we all know that I've made a lot of mistakes when it comes to Hunter's cover. Otherwise, I would have come up with this one right off the top, right from the start. I've made a lot of mistakes with designing, you know, figuring out how to hire a designer and getting the designs in place and stuff. And eventually I will be doing a video about that. But in the meantime, I also made a lot of mistakes for doing the audiobooks. And I learned from those mistakes, and I break that all down in this video here so that you guys do not make the same mistakes that I do. So check that out. You don't want to miss it.